So Anna, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm excited to hear about your healing journey. Before we get started, though, I just wanted to say something that, part of the reason why I created this podcast is to give people a voice. And what I love is they come on and they tell their story, whatever it is, whether it's healing or it's growing, and then they get to tell us what they've done with that. And so you've done some really great things with your healing journey. I remember from our pre-podcast. So why don't you tell us about you and then go ahead and tell us about your journey.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for having me. It's such an honor to be here. Hi, everybody. My name is Anna, and I'm the founder of Healing Journey Retreats. So basically, I host mental wellness retreats to help professionals and entrepreneurs manage stress and burnout. My background is in neuroscience. So during the retreat, we'll be delving into how the brain works, why we feel the way we do, how to change our thought patterns, behaviors, and habits. So the next and first retreat will take place in beautiful Tulum, Mexico, in April 2024. It's going to be Sunday to Sunday from the 21st to the 28th. For those looking for a reset, a recharge, and kind of kicking off the 2024 new year by putting themselves and their mental health first. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, if I can paint a picture, you want to close your eyes, just imagine like in the morning, you wake up to the sun. We have some optional yoga and stretching, followed by connection circles on the beach, delving into some workshops and mastermind discussions around neuroscience and healing modalities, and followed by lunch. The afternoons are reserved for fun things like snorkeling with turtles,
Oh.
exploring cenotes in the jungles, um, group journaling by the fire in the evening, experience a sound healing bath in nature cave, etc., etc.
Mm.
So that's kind of the experience. And yeah, we'd love to have you guys come join us on this transformative journey and meet other healing journeyers, as I say.
Healing journeyers. I like that. And we're going to have all the links and everything available for
Yeah,
everybody too. So that
awesome.
sounds wonderful. I want to go right now.
You're welcome to join us, Lisa.
I just might do that, especially because you changed the date. Because originally it was like, oh, I can't, because I think it was in January or
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
And April, I'm like, oh, well, that's a possibility. So we'll definitely talk about that for sure.
Awesome. Glad to have you.
So tell us, because I know you told me your story, kind of went over it, but I'd love for you to share with everyone your journey. And if I remember right, it wasn't traumatic stuff per se in your childhood, right? It's more just a
No.
growth journey. I shouldn't say just a
Yeah.
growth journey. It's more a growth journey, which is huge. So why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah. For me, yeah, my childhood was pretty perfect. Had nothing traumatic happen. And I think it was in my early 20s. That's kind of when things started to not be so perfect. And I think I just had a huge shock to my system because everything before then was going so well.
Mm.
I was always, according to my parents, like the child who always listened, never had tantrums, just like perfection in a nutshell. And then, went to university, studied neuroscience, got jobs that were pretty much aligned, with society standards in terms of like pay and, just like, I think just, yeah, I've had a pretty smooth sailing life. And then I think I joined a startup, or I had some jobs back then where I've had some run-ins with, toxic workplaces back then. And I mean, it was really kind of the norm. And I really never had a benchmark to compare. So, for example, when I had a toxic boss that would just, be really condescending or passive aggressive, or, like the VP of certain companies, like screaming at
Mm.
the whole floor because we didn't meet our sales goals, things like that. I really thought that was just the norm. Like, oh, maybe
Mhm.
everybody who works, in corporate life or has a job, makes a living, just has to go through these things. So I think it wasn't until recent years, there are more news and like kind of shining the light on yeah, just like workplace safety and psychological safety and things like that. So yeah, back then for me, it was just like, oh, I guess this is the norm. But it definitely
Mhm.
had affected my mental health back then, but I don't even think I recognized that it had an effect. So yeah, mostly it was just, you know, kind of having some anxiety, like dreading to go to work in the morning, and then kind of walking on eggshells about what I could say, what I couldn't say. And it was just kind of like a heightened, you know, physical like tightness. And yeah, I don't think it was a good environment to be in. So yes, I think I eventually realized that, you know, I couldn't really work in that like work in that kind of environment anymore and remove myself from the situation. Um, so the first time I experienced burnout, which was only years later that I realized was a burnout, I took drastic measures of of like, you know, handing in my resignation and then packing everything up into storage and then going to travel. So I think I wouldn't recommend that per se, but that's the measure that I took way back then. Again, like there's nobody paving the way of how to deal with certain things. So I think for me, travel was a way to escape kind of
Mhm.
the couple or 3 years of just yeah working in a really toxic workplace. So I
Yeah,
think that's what started it all with with that experience.
the toxic workplaces is unfortunately so common, and as you were telling your story, I was thinking of my own, and my very first job outside of, you know, working at a fast food restaurant, right? A first real job that I had in an office. It was absolute craziness that I stepped into, and I had no idea. And it was, I mean, I could tell the story. It's crazy. I mean, there were drugs involved.
Oh,
There was, yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on in that office. And I stepped into this, and I'm like 19 years old, and I had
right.
been kind of sheltered, you
Mm-hmm.
know, from all that. And so it was quite shocking, and ended up being years of actually, there was traumatic stuff that went on over the years. And
Mm-hmm.
I realized for myself that I don't do well in a corporate environment. It just, I had one therapist say to me one time, this was really interesting. She said, "You're never going to heal in a corporate environment."
Oh.
Right? That's the exact response I had. She's, and when I thought about it for a second, and I thought, she's absolutely right. And when she said that, it hit me like that. And I started taking measures to
Mm-hmm.
get out of that position.
Wow, kudos to you. Yeah, I think there's certain courage to step away from, you know, especially what I think I would call like a velvet rut. It's so
Yeah.
comfortable, like, you know, it's like it's a rut, but it's kind of covered in this velvety, comfortable
Hmm.
material. Like, you know, the situation is, I think for me, so tough because every time you're like, but I'm getting paid, you know, and sometimes like pretty well. And why would I risk all this and go into the unknown and, you know, quit, you know, um, or even look for other jobs when like this is kind of sustaining the lifestyle that I had, which I think goes into a circle. I mean, this is more about
Yeah.
capitalism and all that stuff,
Yeah.
but like I know the world runs on money, but yeah, I think, you know, in my 20s it was all about like going out and like, you know, having dinner with friends and drinks and
You create a lifestyle with what the way you
exactly.
work. I mean, your work becomes part of your lifestyle, and it supports your
That's
lifestyle,
it.
and it is hard to take a step back from that, you know. But I
For
think
sure.
for me, I just got to a point where, and it's not, you know, I'm saying this because it's what's good for me. It doesn't mean that all corporations, it's all toxic, it's, you know, but for me, the situation, it was having a profound effect on me physically. And I just knew it was time to go. And it was the best thing I did, for sure, for my
Mm-hmm.
mental health. I don't
That's
fit in
it.
that environment. This is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you found your calling. And yeah, I think I resonate in so many ways with that. I think, again, just coming from a family who is, you know, full of scientists and doctors, like nobody's really had any experience with business.
Mhm.
or making money. And so I think entrepreneurship was never really highlighted as an option in my
Mhm.
family ever. And it's always seen as a risk, right? It's being Chinese Canadian, there's a saying in Chinese that kind of describes entrepreneurship as going into the ocean. Like it's like you're taking that deep dive into something that
Which is true.
maybe not everybody would do. So yeah, I think my first experience with quote unquote entrepreneurship was when I got into hosting on Airbnb. And so this was like, I think more than 10 years ago when they first started. Nobody really knew what it was. And I discovered it by accident when I was trying to take a trip on my own to Europe. And everything in Italy was booked because it was like May 5th, this holiday, and the Pope was in town. So I just saw this ad on Google that said like Airbnb, stay with somebody who's, like in their sky bedroom. Um, so anyhow, so that's how I discovered it. And I thought, wait, if I'm leaving on a trip, maybe somebody would want to stay in my place. And so that's kind of how I started. And eventually I also had hosted people on my couch. And I think I just really enjoy that experience. And I mean, before it turned into this money making machine of people just buying properties and having all the self check in locks, which are great. But I think the original kind of vision of what the founders had was to have like the air mattress on the living room. That's why it was called Airbnb, and to really just show people who are in town like your kind of local gems. So I would take my guests out to go on picnics with my friends, like have dinners and
Wow.
go sailing. So I just really enjoy that experience. And it also allowed me to travel the world. But when I travel, I would go stay at hostels, which I really found, because it's kind of like that dorm room bunk beds experience where you can have like 20 people not in one room, but
Yeah.
just kind of hang out, and you have daily activities like free walking tours around the city, cooking
Mm.
classes together. And so you would go to the beach and learn surf, and I just really love that community feeling. And it's kind of like the Airbnb hosting, but it was like kind of amongst yourselves, you're discovering the city together.
Hmm.
And so yeah, at one point, like years before the pandemic, I really wanted to have my own hostel, in fact, because I thought, okay, I've hosted hundreds of guests at my own Airbnb, and I've traveled to more than 90 places in the world at the time, and stayed
Wow.
in probably over 200 hostels. And some of them I was like, I can probably do this. And so I was actively trying to pursue that dream. But again, it's just like it didn't happen, again, because of the pandemic. And in hindsight, maybe dodged a bullet there in a way, because it would have been really challenging. But yeah, I think also just returning to that corporate life and to what you were saying earlier, I really felt like there was a hole in my heart, or in my stomach, or in my
Hmm.
soul. Like, sure, the stability and the money and benefits and all of those things were great, but I didn't really feel fulfilled. And I was also in therapy for many years, and I would ask my therapist, like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just
Oh.
be why can't I just be like everybody else and just be okay with this? Because in my mind, like that the majority of people in the world live like this. And
Hmm.
and they didn't have any other urges to do something else. And so I think that bothered me for like a quite a long time. And because of this hostel project was something I was really passionate about and was actively pursuing, I did take another sabbatical to do market research. So I stayed in the world's best hostels to like really stock the business by staying there, interviewing the managers and the owners, like asking questions and learning the business. And so, yeah, when I couldn't make it happen, I think part of me had to mourn the loss of that dream. So for me, that was kind of like, it also affected my mental health in a way. And so, yeah, I think that was definitely a dark time. Also, given the pandemic, we're all in lockdown, and yeah,
And that was a
I
hard,
was still
yeah.
grateful that I had a job. But yeah, I think it was just definitely like a hard time of wondering like, what why am I like this?
So let me ask you this, because you were saying, you realized in your early 20s that there were things that you wanted to improve, basically, right? There was some growth that you wanted to do. So you traveled,
Mhm.
and in that, what helped you to grow? What helped you to heal? What helped you, because you ended up creating this amazing healing journey retreat, right? And so there's a lot that's happened from the time that you realize, I want to work on this, to creating this retreat. So what do you think was the biggest things that helped in your healing, that helped in your growth, that helped you be able to focus in and create this amazing retreat?
That's a great question. I think from the first moment that I started traveling, and this is like solo travel, which I
Mm.
feel like is quite different from traveling with friends and loved ones, it really puts you in this slightly uncomfortable situation of having to rely on yourself and to make decisions for yourself. And when you're in an environment where you are forced in a way to speak to strangers, whether that's roommates at the hostel or just people at the coffee shop that you're sitting next to, I think as humans we have this innate urge to connect with others. So I think that was deeply transformative for me, because just seeing the world and seeing how other people live, especially when I first went to Europe, it's so normal to meet other travelers who are traveling for, let's say, 3 months at a time. And for
Mm-hmm.
Canadians such as myself, it was not heard of. It's like, oh, you get 2 weeks of vacation. That's
Mm-hmm.
pretty much standard of when you get a job, that's what you get. And so later on, when I traveled, the longest I've been away was 11 months. People were, like, I became that person who's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you've been homeless for how long? um but I think for me it's just like it opened up my eyes to see that there were so many different ways of living, and people in Europe get something on average like 7 weeks of vacation minimum per year. And just to really have the time to enjoy life and to be with family. And even, people in Southeast Asia, there are locals that I've met who really have nothing. There are kids running around the streets without shoes, but they had the most genuine smile on their face.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would make little origami paper cranes from a page in my notebook and give it to these kids, they're just like filled with joy. And so
Mm.
like the littlest things I think really changed my perception about like what is really important in life. And is it this money, is it the 9 to 5, 9 to 9 grind, and then you wait till retirement to finally enjoy the fruits of your labor, or is it something else? So I think for me, I've always found um this deep fulfillment when I traveled. And so even when I returned into society and I had to get jobs again, later on in my 30s, I always tried to incorporate travel whenever I can. And then obviously from the pandemic, the one thing is remote work, and I was able to take advantage of that. And so last winter, I spent 3 months in Mexico. And I think that was another pivotal point in my life where I felt, wow, like, like as someone who struggles with um, anxiety and depression, the winters in Canada are quite rough, because they
Mm-hmm.
start, I mean, depending on where you are, but sometime as early as September, and it lasts until like May. And so I do have this one of my best friends and his wife, they travel to Thailand every year. They're both entrepreneurs, and they're able to take that winter escape every year. And I've been so super envious for over 7 years now. And so when I finally at the time had a job and with my partner too able to work remotely, we decided to try that nomadic life and say, okay, let's go to Mexico, somewhere warm that has the same, time zone more or less than Toronto, which is where I'm from, and to just be away and see what happens. So I think just coming out of the airport, it was like on December 18th, feeling the sun on my face. And when you take a deep breath in, the air does not hurt your lungs. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
just such a refreshing feeling. Seeing like palm trees everywhere and lush green jungle and flowers blossoming. It was just such a different scene from like the slush, the gray, the cold. Um, and I felt like my anxiety was starting to fly away already from that moment. And during that entire 3 months in Mexico, I think just nourishing my body, by being in the sun, I think the vitamin D is really
Oh, yeah.
um, that natural way of being on the beach or laying by the pool.
Being out in the fresh
And
air, the sun.
that's
Yeah.
it. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing, you can't compete with that. And then like,
No.
swimming in the ocean, that's salt water. And there are also these cenotes in the area of Quintana Roo in Mexico, which are natural freshwater sinkholes.
Mm.
They're so refreshing and crystal clear waters. They have turtles in there. It's just such a magical experience. And there are thousands of cenotes in the area. And we just probably went to like one every weekend. And it's just such a magical experience eating fresh fruits. Every avocado was perfect.
Oh,
Just there's
yum.
something about
God.
that. Having access to fresh veggies and fruits that are
Mm-hmm.
at the perfection of ripeness, I think was just um super healing. And in Tulum, and I mean Mexico in general, there are a huge population of expats as well. So I've joined some Facebook groups, WhatsApp groups for locals, expats, travelers to just like meet up. And so I joined some like dinner parties. And I've also met a girl from Canada actually, and so we just hung out, almost every other day, going to the beach together. And yeah, I think that whole journey of trying new things. Oh, and Tulum is also a very, I would say, like a very spiritual place with,
Mm-hmm.
lots of yoga, Reiki, healing modalities, traditional modality like I think it's called temazcal, cacao ceremonies, Ayurveda, ayahuasca, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not very spiritual, again, like very sciencey person, but I did try like women's circles, and those are just really, I think there's something about women coming together in that
Mm-hmm.
sisterhood of sharing stories, and our experiences. And no matter where you're from, like I feel like our journeys are quite similar, especially as women. And so, yeah, I think all of those experiences made me feel like, it really reduced my depressive episode by probably months, if not years, had I not been there. And so part of me felt like, what if I can redesign or transform this 3 month experience into a 7 night long retreat format? Maybe it would help others, kick off their healing journey as
Mm-hmm.
well. So I think that's kind of where that idea came from. It was born out of Tulum, Mexico.
Nice. So I'm sitting here thinking, because I'm sure there's listeners thinking, "God, that is what I want. I want to create that life, right?" And they're not in a place where they can quit their job yet, but they can certainly plan, right? They can certainly start preparing, because that's what I had to do. I didn't just all of a sudden one day decide, okay, this is the day. I had to plan for it. And the other thing I had to do is, because I knew my time was short, um, of course, then I get more sensitive to what's going on around me, right? And it's a tendency to have kind of like the short timers attitude. And that was wearing on me. And I knew that I had to leave there with a good attitude. I had to leave there appropriately. It's the right thing to do, but also to protect myself. And so I had to implement things to protect myself and prepare myself to leave. And so that once I did leave, I didn't, I didn't have to recover. I didn't have to spend weeks and weeks recovering from all of this, right? It was an easy transition. And so what did you do to prepare? I mean, because I don't think you just walked in one day and quit, right? So what did you do to prepare for your travels?
Yeah, I think when I was even I think in my early 20s, when I was finally making an okay salary and looking back, there there's really a lack of information out there way back then. Now, there's so much on social media, on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, everywhere.
Yeah.
People are talking about, financial health. And I think that's such a great thing because way back then there was nothing.
Mm-mm.
And for me, I think it was one of my coworkers who said, "Oh, like the salary that we're making, you should be thinking about investing into like RSPs and TFSAs, which are I think the US ones are like 401k and things like
Oh,
that."
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I think I just Googled like financial advisor and then started putting money aside. So
Mm.
I think, I mean, there's so many resources now, but people say, you should be putting money aside into investments, whether that's for travel or for savings,
Mm-hmm.
for retirement, for house buying, for vacation, for wedding, whatever it is. You should be putting aside like a huge percentage of your earnings every month into such things. Obviously we have rent and food, things to pay for, but I think, I guess, in an early age, like I figured that out in my early 20s, and so was able to put money aside. And so I think it's just always mm, looking at your bank account and feeling like you have um, like a good, like obviously like a good enough backup to kind of hold you afloat if you had to step away from a toxic workplace or a relationship, to have, I think I've heard on a podcast or somewhere it's called like FU money. It's to be able to say FU if the situation is not serving you. So I think every woman needs to have something in their bank
Mm-hmm.
account where they allow them to be independent.
I agree.
So, and I think it is also a perception of investing in yourself. For
Mm-hmm.
me, I was never really materialistic in buying, the like expensive clothing and handbags and things like that. I think I really valued,
Experiences.
spending exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't spend, hundreds and thousands of dollars on materialistic things, but I would spend easily that kind of money for a trip. So
Right.
I think it's about, looking at your finances and your own priorities. And I mean, it's totally okay if things like handbags and material things bring you
Mm-hmm.
joy and fulfillment. But for me, it's just that I prioritize travel and experiences over other things. So that's how I was able to afford so many vacations. And I think it's a very good return on investment. I would say personally, it's been very
You,
worth it.
you're making a really good point. And I think I know what book you're referring to because it sounds familiar to me, but it's really picking what your priority is, right? So it's the
Mm,
first thing is really sitting down and figuring out what it is that's important to you. Because you're right. If your thing is that you love to go shopping, great. If that gives you joy, that's great. So then you can save up money and set that aside, and you'll be able to go shopping and enjoy yourself. If it's travel, whatever it is, but it's figuring out what makes you happy. And it's
mhm,
clear that travel is your thing. And it's not just travel, but you love interacting with people. You love the experiences. And that's what brings you joy. And that is healing in and of itself. And like you said, the growth of putting yourself in situations where I call it usually we live we live comfortably uncomfortable, right?
yes.
And so we break out of that, and that's one thing I'm doing with myself now is really challenging myself. And if there's something I don't want to do, I'll go do it. I'm starting to do that where I'm just going to
Mm.
go do it,
Wow.
and quit falling back on that excuse.
Mm.
And so, cause I want to have experiences as well. And so
Mhm.
it's really planning, and figuring out what it is that is important to you, what it is that you like, what it is that, makes you happy and gives you joy,
That's it.
and and then prepare for it.
That's it. Life is so short. It's so short, really. I think when I was in my maybe mid 20s, one of my really good childhood friends, um, she married her childhood sweetheart, and then he ended up having cancer and
Mm.
passed away, I think, a year after their marriage. And we were just in our mid 20s, and I felt like this is not something I would ever even have thought of.
Mm-hmm.
I think, as naive as we are, we often think, death is as taboo as mental health to talk about, and it's not something we really think about until it happens to us, right? So I think that was another wake up call to say, you know what, we think we're all healthy and happy, but you really don't know like what could happen to your life. So I was just thinking, like, do I really want to climb the corporate ladder and follow, again, like society standards of this lifestyle that I have built for myself, um, or do I want to discover a slightly different way of living? And so yeah, I think through traveling, I got, and it's crazy, one of the jobs I had, was at Aldo, that shoe company. And so I had tons of shoes because the employees, we could get 50% off. So I had tons of shoes.
That would be me.
And
It would be dangerous if I worked for
yeah,
a shoe
oh,
company.
it was bad. It was good and bad at the same time. So it just, you know, had high heels, and then, I haven't worn high heels in like like over a decade, and I think when you start traveling, things like even wearing makeup was not really something that and so I think you just become, for me, I think it was the best version of myself.
Mm.
And it was the truest and most authentic form of myself. And I really liked who I am, or who I was. Um, and I think, yeah, I think that, like, as humans, once you take yourself out of that like cog in the wheel, like corporate machine type of world, you start seeing other possibilities, and then you meet other travelers and even locals and people on your journey that inspire you to live differently. And I think it just kind of like snowballs from there, and it becomes this like slight angle in your in your journey that just like pivots to a different direction. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell us more about the Healing Journey Retreat. How did that idea spark?
Yeah, so like I was mentioning, having spent the 3 months of winter in Mexico, um, meeting all the people, trying all the different things that I've tried, and the food, and the weather, I think just being in a really warm and sunny place for me, my body relaxes naturally. My shoulders just like drop, and then I'm just like standing up straight, and it's just like yearning towards the sun.
Have
um
energy, right?
that's it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Actually, at the time, right before I headed to Mexico, I got laid off from my job,
Mm.
because I was in the tech industry, and as we know, like Facebook, Meta, everybody, Amazon has been laying people off. So it was a really tough time for me. But I think being in Mexico, I didn't really want to rush back into just applying to jobs. I wanted to kind of leverage this time to do some introspection. And I think, going back to my hostel project, that passion that I had for, that dream, I thought, maybe, is there a way to review that or to revisit that? And so in my notebook, I drew this little mountain, and at the top I wrote like hostel one day, and then I
Oh.
and then at the bottom or in the middle I wrote like you are here. And then
Oh.
I just drew like little lines to the top, and I was like, there are so many paths to a hike, right? And so
there are different ways to get to your goal, and what is potentially a way for me to get there eventually. And I think as I, you know, as I gotten older as well, you know, I also think, okay, do I really want to deal with like 18-year-old drunk people coming home, you know, causing a ruckus, or, you know, and also just combining with my own experience and the whole healing journey of like going through burnout, anxiety, depression, of being in therapy for years and picking up other pillars that helped my mental health, like such as, for example, yoga, and, you know, journaling and like women's circles, and, you know,
Meditation.
exactly,
Mm-hmm.
meditation, being in nature, moving my
Mm-hmm.
body, whether that's working out or like dance videos on YouTube. I
Yep.
think it just like I picked up some tools along the way that worked for me. And I wanted to maybe redesign an experience where it still involves traveling or some sort of form of slow travel, because also in my 20s when I was traveling, it's like 3 days here, next at the
Oh,
destination, four
yeah.
days there, and 2 days there. Like you want to see everything on your bucket list. But as I gotten older, the way I travel also changed. So I would say, let's say 1 month in one place, and not, you know, pack my bags and repack and unpack. So I think integrating slow travel and going back to my, you know, Airbnb hosting days of like knowing what little details really make a person's trip, making them feel at home, making them feel safe and supported. And then combining like my background in neuroscience, it kind of came together like this word in Japanese called ikigai, and there's a book on that, but it's like 4 Venn diagram circles that say like, what do you love to do? What are you good at? What does the world need, and what can you get paid for? And so I thought, like, I really love traveling, I really love hosting, I'm super passionate about neuroscience and how the brain works. um, and I do feel like, especially after the pandemic, the world needs, you know, wellness retreats or mental health retreats,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of more mindful way of traveling, you know, because resorts are wonderful. And I've been on all inclusives, you know, over in Central America. And, you know, it's nice to just eat and drink all day for 7 days on the beach and like do nothing. But then you go home and you're like, oh, I don't know
Yeah.
if I felt, I don't know how I feel about that. Like you feel like you had a vacation, but then you feel like you need another vacation from that
Mm-hmm.
vacation because nothing's really changed. So I thought maybe retreats are a way to kind of, you know, go into that slightly introspective state to like see what are the patterns, like just process some things that you may not otherwise have had time to look
True.
into, while still relaxing and doing all the fun things that you would, you know, excursions and whatnot, having, you know, amazing food and the nurturing environment in nature. And then I think the last piece, bringing from my hostel time, my hostel days, is really that community, right? Like other
Yeah.
people who are kind of in a similar mindset, or I say like-minded or like-hearted people, who've been on journeys maybe similar to yours or even different, but they understand where you've been. And so, you know, I think healing is a journey, and it's you we're not alone. Like I said, you know, so many, it doesn't matter where you're from in the world, so many of our stories are quite similar in the root of itself. And so I think when people come together and share their healing journeys, there's something profound about that support and community. So that's why when I thought of this project, the wellness retreats, you know, it kind of touched on all those 4 circles of the ikigai. And I thought, oh, maybe this is what I'm going to try to pivot the hostel project into. And again, just hoping that it's like that machine at the hospital that goes like ding, ding, to your to your heart. It just like kick off the healing journey for others, like the way that it did for me.
Yeah. It sounds wonderful. It sounds really and very needed, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, fortunately, yeah. And I was thinking like if this works out well, I do want to make it like an annual thing. And maybe start adding other destinations, to the roster. Obviously, being in Canada, there are wonderful places here in Ontario, Quebec, I mean, all over Canada. And one of my favorite places is also Portugal. So I think it would be also nice to make it more accessible to those who live in Europe and then eventually Asia. And yeah, I just think like it could be something for everybody else to consider as like an annual tune-up for your mental health. It's like we
Yeah,
do oil change for our cars. Maybe this is like a tune-up for our brains, for our
exactly.
physical bodies, and it could be something that we do for ourselves every year. Yeah, we do take vacations with our family and loved ones, but I think there's also something really courageous about going on a retreat by yourself, or even, of course, with friends. But I think some of the deeply transformational growth really come from doing something on your own. And so I think, yeah, retreats could be such a maybe, in 10 years, like it's like, for example, yoga 10-20 years ago, everybody thought it was such a woo-woo thing. And
Right.
now it's like, oh, totally normal. It's like the gym. And so maybe retreats, 10-20 years from now, it's like, oh, that's just like a vacation and people just go. It's a thing that they do for themselves every year.
It is investing in yourself. And when you
Yeah,
have your mental health more balanced, everything else is much more balanced because your mental health affects your physical, your
that's it.
emotional, it affects everything.
That's
And so
it.
I'm a firm believer in investing in yourself and doing something like this. You know, I
Yeah.
I will go for massages. I invest in that because that makes
Yeah.
me feel good. That relaxes me, and this
Mm-hmm.
is the same thing. And this is just, I think, another opportunity for us to get more out there about mental health. And mental health is not taboo. That
Right.
everybody needs tune-ups. We all need to spend time with ourself and looking within. And it doesn't have to always be deep and heavy, but we do need to check in, and we do need to. I love the idea of going for a week, and I don't know if I'd want to leave though, frankly, but but I am very interested. We'll have to
Yeah,
see
for
how it
sure. And
goes.
I would love to have you. And I think another thing, again, like digging from my traveler past, is that, a trip can be amazing while it's happening. And then you go home and it's like a shock to the system,
Yeah.
especially if you return home and it's winter and it's dark and,
Yes.
you're back in your usual place and you're just like, oh, this sucks. So another thing that I do want to highlight for the retreats that I do is that, I want to have this aftercare program or a community
Mm.
where we continue to check in with each other and perhaps hold each other accountable for, let's say, good habits that we've built while we were on the retreat. And
Right.
so, maybe weekly check-ins, or, like
I like
monthly
that.
Zoom calls, and, mini meetups if we're from the same region, and just to kind of continue to hold each other accountable and support each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, for the retreat now, I'm thinking even though it starts in April, the healing journey can start now,
Mm-hmm.
before the retreat as well. It's an ongoing journey. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm also thinking of having, the participants start to meet each other already. Let's
That's a
say,
good idea.
starting next month. And then as we get more participants, you can also kind of join in on these Zoom calls to see if that's your, tribe of people that you want to kind of share this journey with. Um, and just start to get to know each other. Like I said, I think there's profound healing in storytelling and sharing our experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And, why not start that already? Why
Mm-hmm.
wait 8 months, into the future? So yeah, that's another thing that I wanted to highlight. I think it's so important to have community, especially in this internet age where you feel, connected on social media, but it's
The
it's
face to
really
face. Yeah, it's not, yeah.
it's really
I love
different.
that.
Yeah.
I love that idea too about having a support system after, because it's true. When you go on vacation, you come home, it is a shock to your system.
Mhm.
You go and you had a great time and you had this great experience, and then you come back to real life. And
Yeah.
it's in your body, your brain, it's hard. So that's awesome. And then have the support system. And you meet friends, you get to meet
That's
new
it.
friends. And that's the thing, as an adult, it's hard to meet friends. It's
Yeah.
hard. Mel Robbins did a whole podcast on it. It was really interesting on, as an adult, how hard it is to do. And so this is a great way to connect with other people that are like-minded, and then continue to connect after. It's, because that whole honeymoon phase kind of goes away afterwards. And that's a great way
Right.
to keep it going.
For sure. Yeah. And I totally relate on that, friendship piece. After school and from work, it's really hard to meet people, like at this day and age. It's just so hard to find people who really resonate. And it's hard to go beyond the small talk. And I think even if you join the gym or go to yoga regularly, or it's just like, oh, how's the weather today? Oh, and then you're like kind of changing, and then you like leave the locker room, like you don't
It's
really
just awkward.
you don't really get past that. So I think yeah, like there's so many, I mean, like now we're coming out of the pandemic, so obviously that had a lot to do with it. So I think this in real life connection is something that we're all yearning for. And so yeah, I hope that the retreat, again, like my vision is to have maybe 5-10 retreats a year, maybe something every month. And maybe there are shorter ones as well, like a weekend long retreat, so to make it more accessible to people with young children, who maybe can't go away to Mexico for 7 nights, but maybe they can have one day or weekend retreats, and to meet other people in the community. So yeah, hope people, all the listeners, would join us on this healing journey together.
So tell us, we'll have the links and everything, but why don't you tell us, if people are interested in this, how would they reach out to you?
Yeah, so you can head to the Healing Journey Retreats with an S.com. And on the top right corner, you can email me, you can WhatsApp me, you can book a call with me. I also have social media links on LinkedIn, as well as Instagram. And yeah, I'm right now also offering an early bird special. So it depends on the room that you want to pick, but we have single occupancy, which means you get your own room, or double occupancy, as well as triple occupancy. So for the double, we're starting at $24.95 USD. And so that is comparable, I would say, to most all-inclusive resorts in Cancun or Mexico for the duration of 7 nights, 8 days.
Yeah, that's actually a really good price.
Is a really good price. So even though their flights are not included, we do have 4 excursions, so that kind of make up for it. And I also offer monthly payment plans. So if you feel, you want to have it be more accessible to you, we can discuss some options, and there's no extra cost for that. And so, yeah, I think the early bird special is good for now until, I would say, at least another month. And I don't really want to like rush people into like making a decision, because I know it is an investment. So some people like to, sleep on it and think about it, look at their finances. But again, it is an investment for your health. And like you said so well, just a few minutes ago, you have to fill your own cup before you can be there for others. And I do know a lot of mothers say, like, oh, I got this, and that. But I think, yeah, if you are not, at your best, or, at least your cup is somewhat full, then it's hard for you to be there for others. So yeah.
And it will take a toll on you. It will,
that's
absolutely.
it. Yeah. Yeah. Life, I think I saw something online that said, like, if you don't take the break, life will make it will make you take it, and it will not be at a time or a place that
won't be convenient. It won't be easy. It's so true.
Yeah,
that's one thing I've learned about myself too, is in that whole thing of taking care of yourself. And anymore, if I'm not feeling good, if as much as I can, I will stop what I'm doing and I will rest, because I do so much better than if in the past, I used to just run myself into the ground, and then you're sick for weeks.
That's it.
As opposed to taking a couple of days and resting and getting yourself over it.
That's it.
So invest in yourself.
For sure. I've been in that exact same situation. And I think, yeah, like people don't realize like sick leaves cost you, it could cost you up to a year of your salary. So let's say, even if you make like 40K, or some people make, 150K, that's 150K that you can save if you invest $2,500 in yourself.
Right.
Right. So it's kind of like this preventative measure that you're taking so that you don't, burn yourself to the ground. And I've made that mistake way too many times. Again, I'm so glad that, this podcast exists, because way back then there was no such resources of hearing things like this, that could be any alternatives. It was just like push through, and, this is what everybody else is going through. So, just shut up and,
Well,
get
one thing I think that you've done that is wonderful is you've taken a passion, and this is absolutely possible. You've taken a passion that you have created for yourself, and you're able to make a living from it. And that is a possibility. I think the focus is, like you were saying, follow your passion and everything else will come together. And that's so true. And that's what I'm finding in my life. It's a scary step, I will say. And it took me a long time to get there and get brave enough, because I liked being comfortable in having that regular paycheck and the benefits and that assurity. But it took a point where it was affecting my health that I finally had to take a step back. And now I'm following my passion, and everything else will come together. It will.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, like, I'm still quite new on this journey, and I do hope that, it works out. But I also feel like there was something else that I read the other day. It's like, how do you make a difficult decision? It said to imagine yourself at like 80 years old or 85 years old, looking back in your life, is there a decision that you wish you would have made then that would have, changed your life for the better or for the worse? And so, yeah, when I think about that, I do want to look back in my 30s and say, I did give this a try. And I think, like I said, life is so short. If we don't try, we'll never know. And so
Right.
I think even if it doesn't work out, it becomes an experience. Every failure is a lesson, and it's just part of life. And it is very scary, that's for sure. But I think the fulfillment and the reward of even stepping out of your comfort zone, like you said, you don't want to do something, you're going to try to push yourself to do it. I find that so courageous, and I lack that. I sometimes don't feel comfortable calling myself an entrepreneur, because I feel like there are definitely moments of like freak out, just
Well, yes.
fear, like, is this gonna work? But yeah, like, it's just putting yourself out there and trying something different. And I think, yeah, even if it quote unquote fails, later on, like, at least I've given it a try.
And
I
you
think,
definitely learned something.
oh yeah,
You will have definitely learned
Yeah.
something. And think about, would you say that your confidence is so much more because you have put yourself out there?
Oh, that's it's such an interesting question, because I feel like on the day to day I don't feel that way. But if I look back even just to a few months ago, where I was picking like the domain of my website, like making decisions way back then, at the time that felt so huge. But today I'm just like, wow, that's just such an easy, like, minute thing. So I think, yeah, to answer your question, like, I don't feel like I realize the confidence that I've gained. But if I look back, yeah, it's a huge difference. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I would say that the growth is like going to therapy on steroids. Like, the entrepreneurship, what I've learned from like confronting all of my limiting beliefs, personal limiting beliefs about money, about sales, about marketing, about putting myself out there, about so many things. Oh, it's been a roller coaster. It's not easy. I would say, I thought, oh, the grass is greener on the other side for entrepreneurship. And to say, like, F you to the corporate world, but it's not easy. It's really, I think social media really highlights the success stories a lot more than the challenges.
Right.
The overnight success, the going viral, you know, from a video and things like that. I think it takes so much work. And it's not even just the hours that you put in. Like I do definitely work a lot more than I have ever had in my life, but I think it's the brain juice that you pour into the project. It's how much you care, and I think that's that's what takes a lot of resilience, I would say, to keep going.
Yeah. I mean, and you brought up a really good point that I want to point out to everybody else, and I've mentioned before, is that, you know, sometimes the day to day, it doesn't feel like you're growing. It doesn't feel like you're changing, but just look back. Just look back, like you said, you can go back even just a few months, go back a year. Where were you a year ago? Where were you 5 years ago? You know, I can look back, and I would say the biggest part of my healing really has been the last, I would say 13 years. And when I think about where I was at 13 years ago, and I thought then, oh, I've come a long way, and I had, but the growth between then and now is substantial. But I sometimes, if I just think about what I did yesterday or what I did today, I don't see that growth. But when I look back, that's when I see the growth.
For sure. Yeah. And I think there's so much, like we're all so busy in our day to day, you know, with the work we have to do, with the responsibilities we have to our loved ones. It's really like no one really has time to like reflect on like who we are today, or like what our priorities are, what our passions are, like, you know, these like higher like on the psychological needs, like, you know, once you've got like the basics of like food, shelter, then it goes up to like, you know, eventually, you know, just like higher realizations about who you are as a person. I think it's so hard to get to that because we're so busy now. And
Yes.
especially with the internet, everything, you know, it's like when you send snail mail hundreds of years ago, it would take months to reach, and now it's instant. So I think there's just so much that's been added onto our plates. And I think this book I've been reading said something like that, you know, our bodies have not caught up to how fast the society has advanced, you know, with technology and everything else. And I was like, that's so true. You know, I also think like humans used to only live till like their mid-30s, if that, right? And so a lot of that, and sometimes I often think about like dinosaurs, like they've been around for millions of years. You know, their life expectancy was hundreds and thousands of years, and all they did was just, you know, eat, procreate, and then, you know, drink water, and then that's it. And I was like, wow, there's so much happening, like, and you know, all the jobs are like, you know, fast-paced environment, wearing multiple hats, like being able to multitask, you know, like our brains, I don't think our bodies are really meant to, like they're not really designed to function at this pace. And so I think like introspection, journaling, meditation, those are the natural states of human. That goes back to, you know, hundreds of years ago. I feel like storytelling, right? Like something like this, like conversations. And anyway, so yeah.
Well, and the busyness is also a really bad symptom, and people will use that. And I used to. I was busy, and I used that phrase a lot, and it kept me from dealing with the things that I needed to deal with within myself. It was easy for me to stay busy and not sit down with myself and have that quiet conversation. And that's why a retreat would just be, that's important. You need to give your brain, your body a break, because you're right. We're go. And even, you know, like you said, you're an entrepreneur now, you don't have a corporate job per se, but you're busy. You know, even though you're in your passion, you love it and you're enjoying it, it's a lot of work. And so you do need to have that time where you give your brain a break, you give your body a break. and
That's
just
it.
regroup.
Yeah. And I think sometimes that's the harder thing to do, because I think when you're
Yeah.
with your thoughts, that's why I think meditation is hard for most people, myself included, is that you have to sit with your thoughts and then you have to not judge them.
Right. There's the trick. There's the trick. Don't judge them.
It's so hard. And I think, oftentimes I myself included, like, numb myself with busyness, with work, with social hangouts with friends, and like even watching Netflix, and you think you're relaxing, but it's not really, maybe it might not be the type of relaxation that your body needs, right? Sometimes it's physical rest that you need, sometimes it's mental rest, sometimes it's social rest. I used to be really extroverted, and then I was traveling in hostels, and then after 6 months I'm like, I just need a private room where I talk to nobody and not talk about where I've been, where I'm going next. And just,
I call it being on. It gets exhausting. It is exhausting. I like it, but I need a break.
Right. Even I think extroverts need some time to just be by themselves. And I think, like retreats, and I've been on a couple of meditation retreats, silent meditation retreats with no phones, nothing, can't even read books, can't even write journals. And I think it was extremely difficult. I think, again, we're just not ever given the opportunity to do nothing. And I think for a lot of people, that's where all the thoughts and the past or the future kind of comes up and then haunts them. So I think, again, like given the right supportive environment, in a healing kind of natural place, it's not to say like you're in a dark room, completely taken away from all stimulation. But yeah, I think like a retreat is hopefully, again, more and more what people realize that could be beneficial for them. Just like yoga, how, decades ago it was not the norm, and now it's totally something everybody knows about. And so, hopefully retreats are, and the word retreat as well, you just like, you're retreating into your calm space. And that has so much power in rest, right? I think hopefully a retreat becomes almost a habit for people on a regular basis in their lives, sooner than a decade or a few decades from now, hopefully.
Exactly. Just be part of the norm. Instead of going on vacation, I'm just going to go to a weekly retreat, a week retreat. I'm going to rejuvenate. I want to go. I so want to go.
You're so welcome, Lisa. I'd love to have you.
Well, we'll definitely talk offline here, and we will definitely talk about that, because I am interested in doing that. It sounds wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This has been really good. And I love that, you've taken your growing journey and you've created something that is going to help others. And that's what this podcast is about too, is us, helping each other. And so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for having me. Thank you for holding this space and, sharing this important message to everybody in the world, especially on mental health. There's not enough transparency, I feel. And so thank you for blazing this trail.
Oh, yes. There'll be more for sure. Thanks.